this one is kind of overworked when I was doing the.
Well, I think it's time to get going.
And the knee is just kind of.
Or get started. No, don't go.
Over already?
Oh, good, I guess.
Okay, our speaker tonight is a third-generation Easton resident. He has a collection of historic photographs and a few old stories to share with us. Please welcome Dan Plouse.
Okay. Dan Plouse is here.
George?
Thank you. When I'm speaking tonight, if we could hold the questions till the end, till after I'm done, and then there'll be a short question and answer period at the end. If you ask me questions as I'm presenting, you're gonna get me off track and I might well lose the whole thing. Not a professional. What I'm going to do is, yeah, Doreen's already started. Doreen, would you want to sit over?
Put her in the front row. so
Plouse now.
Yeah, it's after his mother, doesn't it?
The town of Easton is approximately 150 years old, give or take. Easton at one time had 2 railroads, 3 grocery stores, but according to this, there were actually 5 grocery stores, a bakery, a barber shop, 7 service stations, all on that main street there, 5 or more hotels, not cabins, hotels, 2 dairies, 3 sawmills, and believe it or not, there were 17 saloons.
Oh, man.
How many houses of ill repute?
What?
How many houses of ill repute?
17.
17.
Just kidding, just kidding.
Easton started out as a campground, and the next picture, and a trail. Actually, it was a campground and trade route. The Indians came to Easton, Native Americans came to Easton, and they hunted, they fished, and they camped, and they picked berries, and then they went back to Yakima or Snoqualmie, whichever way, for the winters. And the next one. And it wasn't until 1880 that the settlers first came. By settlers, I'm talking about people that they stayed the winter. Next one. And what the settlers did is they did the sawmills. This is a sawmill pond from the Easton Lumber Company. Tip's dad worked there. And if you're going west on the freeway, you'll come to West Nelson Siding Overpass. If you take that overpass, you go down by Lake Lavender, and just as you merge on the on-ramp going west into I-90, you can look off and you can see the mill pond. It's still there. And there was another sawmill, but the mill pond's long gone. The other sawmill was down where Easton Towing is now. It was down at the end of the road down there. And there was a third sawmill. The third sawmill was up by, go ahead, Kevin. Was up by what's it called? Up by RV Town, that ridge place. What is it?
Silver Ridge.
Silver Ridge. Yeah, it was right there. I understand that was a shake mill. And Easton still has the remnants of a dairy. If you go right down, remember the roads. If you go right down Tree Farm Road, and there's an old car sitting there. Not a car, it's a pickup. It's a gray Ford pickup, and the hood's removed and everything. If you go right down there and look to the left, you can see this old foundation right here. The old foundation is the milk house. And the milk house was the, go ahead, another picture, Kevin. The milk house was one, and this was another milk house down at Malms. Go back one picture, Kevin. The milk house that was here was the Snow White Dairy. And the Snow White Dairy actually covered the ground from there all the way across the freeway where the Easton Ranchettes is now. It covered that whole area, as far as I know. And the next one. And this is Malms. This is down by West Nelson Siding again. And this was off to the left. They had this, I think, field here, and I think they had the field across the other road too. And they were the secondary that was there in Easton.
Big barn.
Next one, Kevin. 1884, the toll gate. Next picture. If you go down Tree Farm Road, right to the end of Tree Farm Road, there was a toll gate there. And if you go over to North Bend, go through North Bend, and then there's a toll gate park on the other side of North Bend. Easton and North Bend both had toll gates. And what the toll gates did was they collected money. There was no Washington State Department of Transportation back then. They collected money, and they used that money to fix up the roads, all the potholes and ruts and everything that the wagons put in the road. And so to pass over the pass or anything, you had to go through the toll gates on both sides. Now, the toll gate on the other side, on North Bend side, the road didn't, I thought, well, why didn't they put the toll gate on the other end of North Bend? It turns out that the road didn't go like it does now. It went over across the river to the left there. And so that's why they had to put the toll gate on that side of North Bend. And you can still see that park. It's a great park. Next one. Oh, wait a minute. And then later on, down at the end of this road, this is, the sawmill would have been down a little bit further. But at the end of this road, there was a 12-room hotel. 12-room hotel, and it had 6 fireplaces. Right down here, beyond the toll gate. And then after that hotel burnt down, it was called the Bend of the River down there. After that hotel burnt down, there was a service station there and some little cabins and everything. And it was called, the hotel here was called the Halfway House, or the Midway House, because it was halfway between Seattle and Yakima. Next one, go. Okay, 1886. Easton got its name that year because that's when the railroad came through. That's when Burlington, or Northern Pacific, came through. And they named Easton Easton because it was on the east side of the mountains, and Weston because it was on the west side of the mountains. And that they had turntables there, and they turned the helper engines. They turned the helper engines around on the turntables so that they could help the trains back over the mountains. Then when it got on the other side, they would take the helper engines and they would go back over here. And Easton had a great big roundhouse that they used for the turntables. I've got an old map there, but it just shows the turntable on top of the ground. But actually, it had a huge building about the size of the Easton Gymnasium over it. Might even have been a little bit bigger. That you could go in there and ride your bicycles and see the pigeons roost and the whole works. Okay.
Scary.
Yeah. That's a picture of the old depot. Northern Pacific. Chip Minnick used to work out of that one time. Next one. Post office. Next picture, Kevin. It's right there.
Wow.
That's the Easton Post Office. This is Johnson Brothers store. This is the big general store, the biggest one in Easton at one time. And this faced the depot. Everything in Easton at one time faced the railroad. All the businesses faced the railroad. And by facing the railroad, they faced the depot. This one, the depot would be right here. And they have a little boardwalk. And you go down, there's a boardwalk right there. You don't even have to. You went down the boardwalk and you got right over to Johnson Brothers store. And they used to get the mail off the train. Trains were everything then. Got the mail off the train, wheeled it over here, and it was in there in the post office. And one of the Johnson brothers who built this building was the postmaster. Easton's first post office. Okay, Kevin. School. Next one, Kevin. That's the school. This school was on the south side of the railroad tracks, over where the new fire department building is. That would be the south side of Easton. And this was over there. This was a school on the south side of Easton. For whatever reason, they jacked it up and they put the school on logs. Logs were a common way to move things, and you just rolled the thing on logs. And they rolled this over to First Street in Easton. Now, my mother told me that in the process of rolling it across the NP tracks, that it got hung up in the tracks. The logs did. And so they had to actually stop a train and make the train wait. Trains went both ways then, it was a little busier than it is now. And make the train wait until they got it off the tracks. And this is this old schoolhouse, the original schoolhouse in Easton, later became a church. And some screwball tore it down after that.
It was also a northern exposure.
Who might that have been?
1902. 1902 was when Easton was platted. Remember the Johnson Brothers store that we just saw a minute ago? They were the two brothers that platted the town. They had a plan. Next one. Now, this is 1905. First auto goes over the Snoqualmie Pass. Now, prior to this, there had been autos that went to the summit, you know, and came back, and there had been autos that went to the west side summit and came back and everything. But this is the first time that automobile went all the way over the pass. But the trouble is this is disputed. There's people in Ellensburg that claim that they went over the pass first, and there's people on the west side that said, no, they came over the pass first, and so I just leave it as disputed. Okay. 1906. This was a fire. It seems like every community has a fire or two. Easton was no exception. 1906, it was a fire on the south side of Easton. Now, the south side of Easton was where all the businesses, I shouldn't say all the businesses, I would say, let's just say that's where the saloons were. Next one. Now, 12 saloons got destroyed in that fire. There were 13 saloons in Easton at one time. 12 of them got destroyed in the fire because they were made out of wood. One survived. It was made out of brick. Some of you may have remembered the old Scout Hall that sat across the tracks there. The Scout Hall was a Scout Hall, but before that, it was a saloon, and then it was a jail, then it was a dance hall, and then it was a Scout Hall. Next one, Kevin. This is what it looks like now. Just a few years ago, the Scout Hall fell down, and there's just one wall remaining there. There's not much left. But anyway, that saloon survived simply because it was brick. Okay, Kevin. 1907. This is the second school. Go ahead. See, it's brick. After a fire like that, there's no doubt that it would probably be brick. But it's just brick on the front side there. Go ahead, Kevin. On the sides over here, see, it's wood. They put wood sides, they put a brick front on it, but a wood side on it. And this is one of the early classes here. This would be the primary room. And look at the drapes. You guys ever remember school with drapes? I sure don't. I even went to school, I even went to first, second, and third, so did Tip in that room right there. Go ahead. This is somebody who I thought might be here tonight, so I can embarrass her a little bit, but she's not. So I'll just tell you who it is. That's Barbara Graham from Easton.
Oh.
I think she's maybe 15 years old at the time, something like that. Okay. 1909. This is the second railroad coming through, the Milwaukee. Northern Pacific was already here years earlier, and then Milwaukee came through. And I'm not too sure about this, but when the south side of Easton burnt, all of there where the saloons were and everything, I can't find it in research, but I'm not too sure, but the Milwaukee tracks weren't built on a lot of that ground that was burnt, because that's about where the town would have been, the saloons and everything. And that's the part. The Milwaukee tracks is where the John Wayne Trail or the Iron Horse State Park Trail or whatever it's called now is now. Okay. There's a picture of the Milwaukee tracks. This is up by where you see it built out now, and you can see from I-90 you can see a trestle across Lake Easton, the big high trestle on the John Wayne Trail. This is right there near the trestle, before the tracks were along. Okay. That's Johnson Brothers store again. And these autos are right between the depot and the store. And there's still no I-90 or anything around. And there's not even the Sunset Highway or anything yet. But what this is a 1909 auto relay. In 1909, they had an auto race that went from coast to coast. It went from the East Coast to the West Coast. Ended in Seattle. Ford won the race. Cheated. I won't go into that. But this isn't that race. That race happened. That race happened in June of 1909. This is also June of 1909. But this is a Philadelphia relay race. What this was, is the car on the right, which is a Studebaker, came over from Seattle to Easton and picked up a message from Philadelphia to deliver to Seattle. It picked up the message from the car on the left. And you can see them exchanging the letter there in their hands. And then it took it back to Seattle. The man that was driving the Studebaker said that was an incredible car. He hadn't driven many Studebakers before, and he liked that. It was lighter than most cars, and it was more powerful. And he was just thrilled to death with it. You can see the tire chains on the back of the car. The original tire chains really weren't chains. They were just rope. You got spoke wheels, so you just whip stitched it around the wheel. If your chain broke, you just tied a rope, tied a knot in it, and went back ahead on it. But some of the cars also ran regular chains and the rope. The rope went down a little deeper, you know, if you put a big rope on there, it caught a little better than the regular chains.
Might be bumpy.
This was the beginning of the Cochise Dam. There's Cochise, Ketchlis, and Lake Easton. They didn't build them all at once. They went 1, 2, 3 on them. So this is the beginning of the Cochise Dam. Go ahead. This right out here, you can see that little structure in there. That's called a cofferdam. A cofferdam is like a temporary dam. What they do is they make the cofferdam. The cofferdam holds back the water, and then they can do the regular dam in here. And then the cofferdam, when they're done with it, they can either remove it or they can let the water fill up over it. This cofferdam here, if you go out to the bottom of Lake Easton in the late fall or the early winter, you can still see this. It's underwater now. You don't have a clue where it is now. But if you go out there at a certain time when the water's down, this will be your dam here, and you will see the remnants of that. It's still out there. It would be, this is an aerial view of what it looks like out there now. The spillway is down here on the left, and that's the house there, and water comes out down right through here. But right over here on the right, that's where that cofferdam would be when the water's down, over there on the right. Okay. 1913. The Ketchlis Dam. Go ahead.
That's just a year later.
This is an aerial view. I don't have any pictures of the Ketchlis Dam. I have some construction pictures which may or may not be the Ketchlis Dam. This is a modern picture. This is I-90 over here going around the lake. And you can see how much fill that took. It wasn't, I don't know if fill's the right word, but anyway, embankment. It's a big embankment there. And they actually ran the trains. It took so much that they ran the trains. They put train tracks out there and ran the trains over and trains dumped the debris over. And it's just huge. Most lakes, not most lakes, but a lot of lakes will neck down or something towards the end, but this one just gets bigger. But I don't know if originally it did that or if originally it necked down like a lot of rivers do, or lakes do, because the river is running out of it. So okay. This is, if you're at the post office in Easton and you go up the street towards the state park, you'll go across an old bridge which spans the Yakima River. And if you get out of your car and you look over the edge of that bridge to your right, which is downstream, you will see the remnants of this bridge. The bridge you go over today doesn't have the top on. It's not made out of wood and metal. You can still see some of the superstructure down, and that's a whole car. Get it? One more. This is another picture of the bridge. You can still see some of the superstructure down there on this side. On the other side, there used to be the structure over there by Silver Creek, but it's fallen over now. I was just up there the other day seeing if everything was intact. Okay. Okay, this one's an interesting one. Next one. Prohibition. Easton probably wasn't that dry. I've heard that you can get drunk on Nelson Siding just going between Easton and Cle Elum. But there's a gold story that's really interesting. When I was a little kid, I always heard that at the headwaters, the upper end of Lake Cochise, that there was a mine up there where they were mining for gold. And it wasn't really gold that they were looking for. Yeah. It was a still. Well, what happened previous to that was that one of the businessmen in Easton, he kind of liked the liquor business, so he went back east and he got some finance from the people back east to have a copper mine. It wasn't a gold mine, it was a copper mine. When I was a kid, it was a gold mine. I don't know how it went from copper to gold, but that's what I heard. But anyway, on the paperwork, it's a copper mine. And so they went to the head of Lake Easton, or not Lake Easton, Lake Cochise, and then there's a road that goes back there about 2 miles. And it was a nice wide road, so they could take equipment back there. And actually, if you go up there, you can go down the creek a little ways, and there are mine shafts going back in the rock. They don't go back very far, and there's a lot of water in them. And I don't know where the still was, but they probably weren't in the mine shafts. But anyway, the gold, when I was a kid, I went up there, and the gold, you could see little specks of iron pyrite, or at least I thought it was iron pyrite or gold, in the rocks there, the fool's gold. And so I thought that gold story was true. But when I researched it and everything, it was copper. And they had a Model T truck that was bought brand new. I found that in the research when it was delivered. It was bought brand new, and it was used to ferry the mining equipment in, I guess, and the booze out. And what they did when they got the booze out to the headwaters of Lake Cochise is they put it on a barge or a boat, and they floated it down the lake, down towards Easton. And probably some of our grandparents, knew all about that. Go ahead. Now that wasn't the only boat on the lake. This was also a boat on the lake. You can see it's on skids there, and there's some snow. This boat, it could have been built in Easton, but I don't think so. I think it came in on train. They offloaded it onto the train, onto this sleigh, and they're taking it to the lake. And if you put it on the sleigh, it will tow probably a whole lot easier on the snow than if you tried to put it on wagon wheels with the ruts and everything in the summertime. Next one. Now here it is on Lake Cochise, called the Miami. That's the same boat. You can see the little skipper in there.
Can you back that up once?
Good sized boat.
Ooh, okay.
They spruced it up a little bit. And you can see some of these, they're Easton residents right here. The guy with all the grease all over him, that has to be my grandfather. He must have had a little engine problem out there. But anyway, you got on the boat at the bottom of Lake Cochise, and you went, next one, and you went up to the Cochise Lodge.
Wow.
This was a beautiful lodge that burned down that was on Lake Cochise. Where it was, you have Gale Creek, you have the ranger, it's not the ranger station, it's a guard station. That you go into Lake Cochise, you go around the back way and it's got the guard station right there. Then you have Gale Creek right here. Then you have the campground right here. This was somewhere in that vicinity. I'm assuming that it was probably close to the lake and close to Gale Creek. So that you could, the boat, easy access from the boat, and you had a view of the lake, and you probably got your water out of Gale Creek. That would be my assumption. Anyway, that's where it And that actually burnt. That's a beautiful, look how beautiful that is. Excellent. This was when the construction of Lake Easton Dam started. It was the last one to be built. And I got to thinking about, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. Because that's where the canal started. Go ahead. This is the picture of the Lake Easton house. If you go on the John Wayne Trail right now, or you walk up the railroad tracks, you can still see the same house. It's identical. Go ahead. This is 1932, it says. This is the picture of the dam now. And the house would be right over here. You can see just a speck of it in the trees. Yeah. The boy that, the man that has Cascade Towing, Bobby Hosmer, he grew up in that house. Excellent. Travel permits. This is a weird one. Most people have never heard of this one. I had never heard of it. My brother had never heard of it. Doreen had never heard of it. Barbara Graham had never heard of it. Travel permits. That's these crazy things. What they were is a permit to go over the pass, 1929. You had to have a permit to go from Easton to North Bend. I don't know if it was from toll gate to toll gate or what. I think the toll gates were gone by then. But anyway, it was from Easton to North Bend. You had to have a travel permit. When you got a travel permit in Easton and you went to North Bend, you turned it in, and that was the end of it. Apparently they must have communicated by telegraph or something. And if you didn't turn it in, somebody came looking for you because you obviously broke down someplace. And here's a few of the weird cars that are on here. We have a Hudson, we have an Essex, we have a Star truck, and we have a Mormon. And what it does is it tells them, you put your name up here, what you're driving, and a license number, and then it's signed down here by the district engineer or whoever, and then it's just turned in and you get it back. Now, we came across these in my grandfather's garage. They were in an old barrel. And this amount survived, but there was about 3 times this many, and they're pretty deteriorated. They were in the bottom of the barrel. But anyway, isn't it bizarre? If you're gonna pass, permit to go over the pass. Okay.
When my dad came over.
They need that again.
1929 is when they bought this. And
This is-
back to
This is one of those permits, right here. Had your name up there. This is an earlier one. They changed the format on these permits about 3 different times, and they stopped putting the year up there. This is just one that has the year, so you believe me. So that it may probably span, several years. That's what I'm assuming. Okay. So Palmy Path, open all winter. Can you imagine that? If you wanted to go somewhere in the wintertime, you were going to go on the train. You're going to go on the train to Seattle, you're going to go on the train to Yakima, you're going to go on train wherever you're going, because the train didn't care if it snowed or not. Go ahead. This is the picture of Snoqualmie Pass in the wintertime, right here. That's the next year, 32. Skiers. Skiing was a big deal. It was a big deal in Cle Elum. It was a big deal everywhere. It was especially a big deal down at Hyatt because they had the Milwaukee Road had a big hotel down there, the ski bowl thing. Okay. Can you imagine 2-wheel drive, no narrow wheels? Probably plowing the road yourself and going up to the pass like that. 1934. 1934. That's the next fire, not the next fire, but that's another fire in Easton. I found information for 2 fires in Easton, but there seems to be that there was 3. The fire in the middle, like in 1912, I have no idea what it burned or where it burned. But this one, I definitely know where it burned. Go ahead, Kevin. It burned the business district. The Johnson Brothers store that you saw where the post office was and everything, it burnt out to the ground. It burnt a lot of the first picture that was up here, it burned a lot of that section just right to the ground on one side of the street. And it even attempted to burn this building right here. This is an old garage in Easton Service Station. It's wood. Show the next picture. And this is after the fire. Now what happened after the fire was the guy got the hint that after his building got all charred and everything, but didn't burn to the ground, then it would be a good idea to put chicken wire and plaster on the building. So that's what he did. This was after the fire with the chicken wire and plaster. He didn't want any more of that burning stuff because he got his hands burnt trying to put out the fire. And I tore the building down. I tore this building down here, my brother and I did. And I didn't know anything about the fire. I didn't know the building had ever been. I knew that the building was in the way of the fire, and my grandfather got his hands burnt, spraying with the hose and all that stuff. But I didn't know the extent of it. So when I tore the building down, all that chicken wire and plaster comes loose. And then you could see the burnt wood and everything. And why it didn't catch on fire is, who knows, okay?
Gas station.
Oh, and wait a minute. Easton Hotel, that building still stands. The Easton Hotel, still stands. It's right there, the saloon's right here, and it's right across the street from the saloon, not across the street, but kind of kitty corner from the saloon, it's still there. And you see the bus there? That says Seattle on the front. That baby's going to Seattle, it's going over the pass. My dad said that you could catch the bus, go to Seattle, go to Cle Elum, go wherever you wanted to go. I don't know why you would, the train's so much better, but it did, okay. This is when the power line came through Easton, for the first time. Power line's been through Easton about 3 times, but this is the first time. This is when they put the wooden towers through and everything. Wanna go one more? This isn't Easton, this is down the lower valley, but that's what the towers, original towers look like. They were wood, then they came through and put in metal towers, and they came through again and put in super towers. Okay. 1941. 1941 is kind of after the fires, but this is when Easton did their fire department, volunteer fire department. It was formed in 1941, kind of a godsend. Okay, Kevin. This is 1948. This building was built by the community. It was a fire station in the bottom and a dance hall up in the top. It was all community built. It's cinder block building, and the lumber and the labor and the land were all donated. And the community just came, and I've heard that if you wanted to lay cinder blocks and didn't know how to lay cinder block, that was a good way to learn. Anyway, it's a residence now, and it's still there on the Easton Main Street, Railroad Street. Okay. 1944. That was the phone. I can't believe my grandfather died before this, and I can't believe that my grandfather never used a phone, but that's the way it is. This was the first phone in Easton. Remember those little phones that you had to crank and everything? One more. He doesn't remember. I don't know. That's where the first phone was. Faye's Cafe. They had the first indoor phone. And the years later, Faye's Cafe, right over here on the left, they had one of the first outdoor phones. You know the phone booths, actual booths? They had a phone booth there. And Debbie has informed me that it wasn't the only one in Easton. I thought it was the only one in Easton, but no, they had one up at Gertie's service station too. So there were 2 that I know of. Okay. Oh,
And
this,
they were the only non-party line phones. Oh, we all had party line.
this building right here, Faye's Cafe, it fell last winter in the snow. We had a brutal snow in Easton last year, and so it fell. It's not all the way down, but it's pretty close. Okay, Ken. 1950. Oh yeah, next one. Easton got a diner. This was an old rail car that came to Easton. And it was a dining car on the railroad. And dining cars on the railroad had, individual tables and everything. But this one didn't. This one, they remodeled it and they put a long bar across, like this table. They put a long bar across it, and then you had stools here, and you could go in there and sit on the stools, and right across here was a great big grill over here where they cooked your food. Kind of like the modern thing, where you want to see them cooking them and everything. That's what it was. And there's a story about this, that they tried to bring it to Easton on the highway. And when they brought it on Easton on the highway, it was too tall, or there was something wrong where it couldn't go across some twin bridges over by North Bend or something like that. So they took it back and they put it on the railroad, and it eventually came in on the railroad. And then offloaded from the railroad, and they came over and they sat it down here. Now, the good thing about this, this is about a 1970 picture here. This one actually is in a railroad museum now. It's in the railroad museum, and I think it's in Tacoma. Someone bought it, and they completely restored it, and it's in the rail museum. So that's really good for it. It's one of the ones that's, I think the undercarriage is wood and everything on it. I think that there's another car there which is in back of it, and that one has a metal undercarriage. That's a little later model.
There's your phone booth.
Yeah, there's the phone booth right there.
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Very good. See, I didn't lie. Okay.
You were right where that was, didn't you?
1950s, the races. A lot of people don't know this either. Unless they're the old pit crew like my brother. Nice to meet him. Easton had stock car races. Remember, Louis?
Yep.
Okay. Easton had stock car races. And where the stock car races was Sun Island Park. Is it a park, Sun Island? You know where Sun Island is, right? Down the off Tree Farm Road. Okay. Go ahead, another picture, Kevin. No, back one to the races. I thought I had another picture, and I guess I edited it out. There's an old bulldozer that sits right off Tree Farm Road. You know, yard art thing, all rusty. The driveway that goes down by that bulldozer, if you were to go right straight in that driveway for, 200 feet, something like that, you come to the river, or the river used to be there. I don't know where the river is now, private property. But the river used to go there, and they had two huge logs that were pulled across the river, and they planked them. And that's how you got to the racetrack. That's how you got to Sun Island. It was an island. And best I remember, and I was a little kid, so things get exaggerated, but it looked like it was about 10 feet down to the water because you had a high bank, another high bank, and the logs were pulled across. If any of you know Don Hill, who lives in Roslyn, he was the one that used Bobby Campbell's cat to pull the logs across for the planks. And the bridge got washed out, and the land got sold, and races went away. But anyway, these are some of the old stock cars. People came from all over to,
That's awesome.
to enter a car and race and watch. And I can remember a little kid being a spectator there. Even though they watered the track, it would just be a big dust storm. I don't know how people could even see. I didn't enjoy it at all. I just ran around. I think he was enjoying it. The park and the school. That's kind of what happened in the 1960s. One more picture, Kevin. We got the state park in the 1960s. It's almost a 700-acre park. It's growing. I don't have a picture of the old school. I mean, the newer school when it was first built. I think they built that school just so you at Easton have a first-class gymnasium. But that's just my opinion. But anyway, we got the state park and we got the school in the 1960s. That was kind of a big deal. Okay, Kevin. 1969. That's when Easton was bypassed. That's when the highway just went around Easton. Till then, the highway kind of came to Easton 4 lanes, and then it got necked down in Easton, and it went 2 lanes to Cle Elum. And you just shot right straight out of Easton. There was no overpasses or anything like that. And then this particular year, it got bypassed completely. Now what's kind of unique about this is 1969. 1969, that was kind of the era of muscle cars, right? Easton kind of became a ghost town when it was bypassed. So that meant that the main street of Easton, there was a crosswalk. You saw the diner there, the Easton Diner. There was a crosswalk at the diner. The crosswalk to the state shop. What was it, quarter-mile smoke? Yeah. He would tune the cars up in Easton. I remember riding in the Corvette with him. You burn burned the tires off at the crosswalk, and you had a quarter-mile straight shot right down there. There was no more traffic in Easton. Anyway,
And no
it was both good and bad. You know, Easton got bypassed, it dried up, ghost town, but it was turned into a good drag strip. There was nothing down on that end of the street going out of town for an awful long time. Just a few houses. It's not like now. The post office wasn't down there. Okay, Ken. Parade. This is a centennial parade, and it happened in Easton, probably in a million other towns at the same time. One more. And you can see that because it was a centennial parade, that this is Mike Stone's father's old Chevrolet pickup, and he decked it out so that it looks like an eagle. See that? That's the head of an eagle, that's a feather. You can see, there's another picture where you can see the front, you can see the beak of the eagle and everything, you know, over the grill of the thing. Anyway, that's the,
It overheated, so they had to take the front off.
and up on top, right, was the first annual, I won't say annual type parade, is Linda Campbell, Linda Stone.
Oh.
She's the parade queen there. You can see her. One more, Kevin.
You know who this guy is right here?
I don't
That's
know who that
Kevin.
is.
That's me.
That's you?
Yeah.
Huh? For sure.
Yeah.
I thought that
Danny
was
had a
girl.
lot of hair.
Times change.
She was beautiful.
That parade wasn't the only parade in Easton. That was supposed to be the first annual parade in Easton. And I say type because there was some years that Easton didn't have a parade and it was missing, and then it became annual, and it's been annual for quite a few years now. But that wasn't the first parade in Easton that I know of. There was another parade in Easton that happened prior to 1934. Next one. Which is this one. You can see the sign there, it says Easton Groceries, Camp Supplies, and this picture is before 1934, but I don't know if it's in the 20s or the 30s or what. You can see Johnson Brothers store over here. This is the back side of Johnson Brothers store. Remember, the Johnson Brothers store looks towards railroad tracks because of the train. Now we have cars in Easton. So all the businesses that once faced the railroad tracks, all the new businesses are now facing Railroad Street. Because the new businesses are catering to traffic, you know, cars, not trains. And you can, I don't know, I had this photo enhanced a little bit. You can see it up here afterwards if you want. But anyway, the store burnt in 1934, so the picture's prior to that, but when, I don't know. They look like doughboys from the hat, but I you know, World War I or something, but I don't know. Okay. I'm going to go into just a few notable people that came from Easton, or touch bases in Easton, or at one time or another had something to do with Easton. The first one is Sherwood Egbert. These people have all passed on, so I'm going to read this so that I don't screw this up. He was born in 1920. He was actually born in Easton. And it turns out that he was the CEO of Studebaker Automobiles in the early 60s. And that happens to be when the Avanti came out. Now, the Avanti automobile was way ahead of its time. A lot of the Studebakers were ahead of their time. The Avanti was European styled, and when they came out with the prototypes and stuff, there was so many offers or so many orders from the dealerships that they thought that Studebaker was just going to go to the moon. But what happened was that they had production failures, and they couldn't fill the orders. So when they couldn't fill all the orders, they couldn't fill hardly any of the orders, everybody started canceling their orders. So when the orders were all canceled, that was kind of the end of Studebakers. Anyway, the Sherwood Egbert, he was there at the beginning of the 60s when the Avantis came out, and they modified one of these Avantis a little bit, and they took it to the Salt Flats and went 170 miles an hour. That's pretty fast for 1960. And Sherwood, he had cancer. And he was trying to be the CEO of a company that was trying to make a turnaround and bring out a brand new car. And finally, and he had to be gone, you know, for weeks at a time dealing with his cancer and everything. So finally, Studebaker went bankrupt. A couple years later, Sherwood died. But anyway, it's a beautiful car for 1960. Next one. This one is Barry Prather. Barry Prather was born in 1939. I'm not sure where he was born. But he was the youngest member of the 1963 Mount Everest team when Jim Whittaker was the first American on the summit. Barry didn't get to the summit. He was going up the mountain and he got altitude sickness. He tried to go up a little too quick. He was the youngest member of the team, was probably the biggest and probably the strongest. These are elite people, you know, when you get to that level of mountain climbing. And he went up too quick and he got mountain sickness and he ended up spending some time in a tent on I can't remember, it was beyond base camp though. And well, he went to school in Easton. He graduated from Elmsburg High School, but he went to school in Easton. Sparks Road. When you go to the end of Sparks Road, right out there by the power line, he lived right up in the log cabin, right out at the end of Sparks Road by the power line. That's where he was. He did all of his early schooling in Easton. Next one. Jim Richmond. You may know him.
Jim.
That's his son. Jim Richmond. Cub crafters. These planes right here. He was in Easton also. And he was born in 1953. And what he did is his father was a pilot and he got interested in restoring Piper Cubs. Piper Cubs were the little planes, you know, the short takeoffs, you know, short landing type of things that the brush pilots used and everything. And he got interested in restoring them, so he started restoring them in Yakima. And then he got so good at restoring them that he actually got the licensing and everything that was required to make them from scratch. These are some of the scratch-built little planes right here. And he grew up in Easton. He even graduated from Easton. And where he grew up was at the end of Sparks Road. Now this is what's bizarre about this, and I didn't even put two and two together until I started putting this on paper. Barry Prather, the mountain climber right before, and Jim Richmond, they grew up in the same house. The same place. Just a decade separated them. Same house, same place. Good water out there, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this man probably. Scobie. He was the commander of the space shuttle that had the O-ring problem. He was born in Cle Elum. I guess Cle Elum and Auburn claiming kind of. He said he was born here and he spent most of his time in Auburn before he became an engineer and a pilot and an astronaut. But what people kind of don't know is that he spent his first year of life in Easton. His family, his father and his grandfather both worked for the railroad. I think NP. They both worked for the railroad. And they worked out of Easton. They lived in Easton. He just came to Clem to get born. Anyway, his first year of life was there. And then I think his father, might have been his grandfather, got a job in Auburn, and the family moved to Auburn. And we never saw him again. Next one. In the beginning, I said that Easton, started off as kind of a campground for Native Americans and a trade route. Next one. It still is. There's the interstate. Go back one, Kevin. Here's your campground. This is right here in the state park, right up there at the lake right now. So we've gone from where it started to where it ended. Mm-hmm. And it's the campground and it's an interstate. Still trade route, still a place to camp. One more. If anybody has any questions now that I can't answer, it's a time to ask them. If you don't have any questions, I've got more pictures. Yes?
How did your father get the permits that he had in the barrel? How do you end up with the permits they used to go over the pass?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather,
My
okay.
grandfather. One of the pictures in there, a lot of these pictures are family pictures here. The station that I was talking about, that I showed you the before and after pictures here.
Gas station?
Yeah, this is the garage and the gas station. It was one of the bigger ones in Easton. And I'm assuming that he got them because that's where they were turned in. The depot would just be very close here for the telegraph and everything. I just think he was on the receiving end when the traffic came from North Bend and turned them in on Easton. Because all of these are from North Bend to Easton.
Okay.
He might have issued them too or something, but I don't know because they would all be in North Bend.
I wonder if the permits were more for a safety,
Yeah.
a safety factor. You know, you think about, you know, today going over the pass is still, you know, can be a hazard. Think about back then when they didn't have what we have today. So they could keep track of and make sure that the people got from point A to point B.
Yeah, originally I thought that maybe they did that as a safety factor, then I thought, oh, maybe people were gonna get lost or something too. But there's only one road, folks, and so I don't think you had a chance of getting lost. I think it probably was actually a safety factor, getting broke down. I
they have
think
to
there are a
pay
lot
for
of
it?
these cars, you know, that probably weren't that dependable back then, yes.
Do they have to pay for the permits?
I have no idea.
Huh.
I don't think so, because there's no fee on them, fee or anything on a piece of paperwork. I don't know. Any more questions?
What was the maximum population, do you think, at any point in time?
I don't know, because Easton was in transition, and a lot of the people came there and they would work the summer, because that's when the dams were built and everything. They couldn't build the dams in the winter, and they went away on the train. A lot of people went away after they charged up the grocery bill, they went away in the night, you know, and different things like that. So the population in Easton right now is probably somewhere around 500 or something like that. But I assume with 13 saloons, I don't know. I think the 13 saloons probably took care of the people on Nelson Sign and the people in Cabot and people all in the surrounding community, yes.
Well, beyond the building of the dams, what attracted people to Easton? Were they mining or something there?
There was
Or logging? Is that
Yes,
what brought
logging.
people there?
an incredible amount of logging around Easton.
Okay.
Yeah, they did mine them. They scratched the surface of mining in Easton, but there was nothing there. But as far as I know, the railroad, Burlington Northern, still owns all the mineral rights for the ground under Easton, in case someone wants to come in and mine it like they did Roslyn or Ronald or Cle Elum. Another question?
The turntable, when there was a fire, was it wood or
No,
was it tracks that
Tracks.
turned on a spindle kind of a thing?
yeah, you had a turntable, you had a round disc here, and then you had tracks that came in. And it came in, and as soon as the helper engine and the coal car, whatever was tacked to, then it would go around, and then, see, you'd be on tracks when you turned it again, and it would drive up.
How long did that last?
I don't know the
But you didn't run across the
No,
dates for that? Because there
No.
was fire over there and, interesting.
It's the early pictures show the turntable over there, and they just show it on the ground. It was down in the ground, where the turntable was and everything. But they show it with no covering or anything. But the later pictures, when I grew up, I used to ride my bicycle in there because it was called a roundhouse. It was a big gymnasium-like thing over the top of the turntable, even though I didn't even know there was a turntable because it was all covered in by that particular time. And NP used to store grain in there, and then after that, the state highway stored the salt for the winter in there. And there was a roundhouse, about where the maintenance shed, or the maintenance shack for the railroad is right now. And there was a second I don't know if it was actually a roundhouse or not, but there was a second big building just down the tracks a little bit. And that's where they did all the machine work. That's where they had lathes and some other machines in there, so they could work on the actual trains. The one just turned the trains, but the others repaired the trains, I guess. Any more questions?
I got one more. The rail car that's there now, was it ever used as a cafe?
No, no,
It was just put there when they took the other one away to kind of, oh,
no. They were both in there at the same. The first one was in there by itself, and then at a later date, the second one came in there, and it was, there's two stories to that. One story is that it was going to be a beer garden, and the other story is that it was going to be something historical, like a historical museum or something. And neither one of them, it didn't pan out either way.
When you researched the mining and bootlegging operation ahead of Ketchies, do you know anything about the Duwacker family or any of the Duwackers?
Okay, everybody, I did not say that name.
I didn't know I was.
But he's right.
Anyway, I cut some trail up
Yeah.
Plouse there, and when this was, geez, this is 20 years ago or more, but there were foundations of those buildings you talked about too, the mine foundations. But I just heard a lot of stories about the other operation they had up there, and I don't know how the Duwacker name came up, but
Good one, Willie. When I went up there as a little kid, there were some billows up there. And the billows, I don't know, they had to bring it in on that Model T. And they were huge. I don't know how they even used them. You know, they must have had a blacksmith up there that had arms like this or something. And I don't know why you need billows that big. I'm sure it probably had to do more with the moonshine than it did with the mining. But the last time I was up there, the billows were gone. But the old Model T, you could still see the framework and everything there. They just abandoned it, ran out of gas, the barge sank. I heard the barge sank or the boat sank. You know, Prohibition was over, I don't know which. It was just abandoned up there until the wheels rotted off and people started taking parts off it and everything. But the trail's still there. It was a nice white trail the last time I saw it. Any more questions? Renee?
Danny, who brought the diner in, and were they the first ones to operate it?
Peels, yes.
Oh. Golly, you didn't mean
Lee
right.
Peel, Lee Peel.
And they had it brought in themselves too? They had it brought in? The Peels did?
Yeah,
Wow.
Lee Peel did, yeah.
Is there a cemetery up there?
Easton doesn't have a cemetery. Unless you include dogs. I see some dog collars on trees every now and then, but that's about the extent of it. I'd like to run through just a few more little pictures here if I have time. Do I have time?
Sure.
She
Yep.
says yes. Good, look at you. This is a picture of the early Easton before the automobiles and everything. And if you look right in here, Easton School would be right in those trees on the right there. Easton School that we have now. That's an old corral that was behind my grandfather's shop, and so if you look right down there, and you look at right down there, that's Old Man Knows there, and you look down there, that's a river right down there. And this is one of the delivery buggies for the Johnson Brothers store, so you can see it up here. Johnson Brothers Easton, on the collar of the horse. See that dog? That dog's big as a bear. And you hear, this is one of Easton's first taxis. Easton needed some taxis because you had,
17 saloons.
my mother said that the engineers came in on the railroad, and so they had to go to the dam and everything, and rather than, rent a horse or something, they would get in the buggy and go out. Surveyors probably needed them to go ahead. And this is, the horse and buggy were the first taxis, and this was the second taxi. I think that this was the first car that was owned by someone in Easton, and it was used as a taxi too, and it was used for the same reason, to take the engineers out to the dams and the canals and everything. Go ahead. And you can see this part, it's a little unique. That was owned by there was a lumber company, and the lumber company had offices in Seattle and had offices in Yakima and various other places. And he'd come through and buy the fuel there, and it was an advertisement. It says, something, John Jower Lumber Company.
John Dower.
Yeah. And he's getting fuel. Must have been bizarre to drive that thing. Everybody looking at you. I don't know. I couldn't handle it.
Feel right at home. Feel right at home.
The early housing in Easton. This is one of the early houses. This is one that was torn down, but it was right on the main street of Easton. The early houses were just little one-room kind of shacks, cottages. And that's that same car in front of the house. This is the house. Click one more here. That's the same house. This house is still standing today on First Street, on the corner of First Street and Depot Street. You had the church here. This would have been right across from this house. Is still, it's a little different, but this is one of the first houses in Easton. It's still standing there. It looks a little different. It's got a fence around it now and everything. That is a beautiful house.
It's not Hoffhein's place, is it?
Hmm?
It's not Randy's place, Hoffhein's?
No, this would be kitty corner from Randy's place.
Okay.
Randy's place, actually, the Johnson Brothers, people that own Johnson Brothers store lived where Randy's property is, not Randy's house.
Yeah.
But they had a big house there, and that's where they lived. And it later became apartments and different things for the teachers. That's what Easton looked like. You would see that service station that we were talking about. And this is the backside of Johnson Brothers store now. I think that what happened here is that the Johnson Brothers that faced the railroad, and everything was facing the railroad. And then when automobile traffic started on the other side, when cars started, I'm not too sure, but what Johnson Brothers did build a second story on that building and face the building where part of it faced the railroad and part of it faced the railroad street, the new automobile street. You can see this is
I
the
need to
Easton.
trim something out here.
This is the Easton Hotel here again. That's the one that's still standing. Go ahead.
I want to point something out here. You see my arrow?
Yeah.
You see that hill? That's how it
Atlantic
started. Only a few of us that know how it ended.
It's a sledding hill.
Yeah. You can see a little bit more of Easton here. You can see the bus again. You can see the hotel. And see this house here? That house still stands. It's that little greenhouse that's right at the top of the hill there. But you can see, when you wash your clothes in the winter, you just hung them out and they kind of freeze dried, I guess. There's another picture. You can see some of these buildings. You know, Eagle Pool Hall, you know, that's long gone, and this is a hotel here. I think that might have been in Kokomo or something. I'm not sure about that. But you have the water tower down here. There's Johnson Brothers store down there. And beside Johnson Brothers store, you can see another building there, and you can see another building where the old fire station is in Easton. That's not the original building. There were buildings there. There was a lumber yard there, and there was a hotel there before that, and that whole section up there that's abandoned now, where there's nothing, that had a whole row of houses. Okay, Kevin. And that's the water tower there. And remember last winter it was brutal in Easton.
Nothing like
We had snow, and more snow. Well, this is Easton. They just got done shoveling the roof up there, and I don't know if the kids are playing on it or what, but that's back when you didn't have aluminum roofs or metal roofs or anything, and so they were safe to stand on with shingles, and so you could get up there as a kid and you could slide off. Anyway, my parents' house would be about right here. That's just looking at my parents' house. I can remember when I was a little kid, I'd look up at the snowbank, you know, where you had to throw the snow way up with the shovel. My brother might have even shoveled some of that. That would be about 1955, 56, something like that, I think. Okay, Kevin. That's too, go one back. This was the Peel House, the people that had the diner there in Easton, that's their house there. Okay. And this is the water tower, I just showed you that water tower a couple pictures back. This is the water tower. In the winter time, sometimes it would fill up and it would overflow with water a little bit, and if it was cold enough, the water would just freeze to the. I always thought that would be good to ice climb, but I got to thinking, that comes off all at once. And this Johnson Brothers store, it burned to the ground, remember, in the 1934 fire. This replaced it. This was something that was built, and it had groceries in this part, and then the post office was in there again, like it was in the original Johnson Brothers store. And here it says Ed's Cafe on the end down here. Now in later years, what happened was, this grocery store still sold groceries, but down here where the cafe was, it became the post office. Post office must have outgrown the store or something and needed its own, entity or something. So the post office was put in there. And in later years, this was bought and it was turned into a saloon. That's the Easton Saloon now. Easton Saloon. You can see this building right down here. See, that is not that's not the whole fire station. That's a different building. That's a hotel down there.
Oh.
And you can see the whole car over here. I don't know, what is it, Model T? Huh. If you know who this is, put up your hand. 4 generations right here. You got people in Roslyn, you got people in Cle Elum, you got people in Easton, you got people all over. That is the part of this family tree. The cute little guy right there, amongst all these women, he's right there in the white t-shirt. Put up your hand too. That's his mother, that's his grandmother, great-grandmother.
Wow.
One more.
How neat.
This is a picture of what Easton kind of looked like. All the pictures that I can find of Easton, they all show the north side of Easton. I can't find any of the south side, which burnt. I mean, when it burnt, it was a little early, for photography and everything. And also, I think that most of the pictures that were taken, maybe not most of them, but a lot of them were taken from the water towers or some of the higher structures, I think, which would have blocked the view of the southern part of Easton. But anyway, you can see some of these buildings. NP, there was an NP hotel. The railroad actually had their own hotel there. NP hotel right over here. You can see a slug of buildings that aren't there now. So Easton may have a comeback, who knows? That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Lots of good information.
You have one more question.
Well, I was just wondering if you came across any of the, building the canal from where it was starting from the dam. 'Cause my dad saw them doing the canal down by our place with steam engines and draft horses, how they dug it. And I didn't know if, right up there in Easton, if there were any photographs of getting that
Yeah.
built and started.
My great uncle actually drove a wagon there and shoveled the gravel into the ditch. Yeah, it was ancient steam shovels and wagons that did all that. I think the steam shovels actually came from the Panama Canal, at least one of them.
Wow.
It was recommissioned for doing the canal.
Those were quite some good pictures. Where'd you get them all? Were they just family pictures or?
A lot of them were family pictures that I inherited. My brother had some, and they're up here on the table if you want to see any other. And I actually have more. I had actually enough pictures and enough information for about a 3-hour presentation. I about drove poor Debbie crazy editing this down to 45 minutes. She had to change this PowerPoint so many times to get it.
Peeling back.
Good
Well,
job.
The timing is
Well,
excellent.
that means you could do another program
Yes.
then.
Just running.
Would you like to learn to run the computer?
Yeah, I don't know anything about computers, so.
I don't either.
Do you
have this written down anywhere, this history? You have it written anywhere?
Right here, underneath this, there's a complete timeline here that goes from 1854 to 1976.
Okay,
So,
good.
and it's got dates in here, it's got so much stuff that I omitted to get it down to time frame. So that's what
Thank you.
the little group, the little history group of Easton, you know, this gave us an opportunity, which I would like to thank you for, that we kind of got this off our chest. Now it's recorded. And so it's history now.
Yes, and this this recording will be on our website within the next week or two, nkcmuseums.org, and then click on Night at the Museum. And so it'll be there for posterity. Check it out.
Thank you. Wonderful, thank you.
Good
Thank you.
job.
Yeah.